Hello. All right. Uh, hey, everybody. Welcome to the live stream. We have a brand new setup over here at Kratos BI. Hopefully, the sound is all right. I'm still testing some of this stuff out. So if you're on the live stream and give us a thumbs up if the sound is good or not, that would be great. I'd appreciate that. But today we are going to be talking about something that is straight up one of my absolute favorite things, which is how do we polish the scenes of our data story, Chapter 8. Um, you know, this is going to be quite good. So really excited to get into this and to get the conversation going with Belinda, Sean, and anyone else who joins us. So we're going to be heading into it just right after this. Alliance is counting on you. Like, subscribe, leave a comment down below, turn on that alarm bell so you don't miss any future mission. All right. Okay, thank you all for joining us today. Kevin, good to see you. Linda, Sean, always nice to see you guys as well. Oh my gosh, I screwed up the whole story already. That's how we do. That's how we roll, right? Chapter 8. All right, so Chapter 8. I don't know if did you guys get a chance to read through this yet? I hope.
Yes.
Awesome. I will say, I'm really one of the biggest things that has got me most jazzed about this book club, and I think I'm going to do another one of these. Is it's kept me focused and honest on reading this book. Very easy to purchase a book, read a chapter or two, and then oh no, it just sits on the desktop. Well, every week, Wednesday at noon, I know I'm going to be talking with you guys about this stuff. So, holy cow, that book's got to get read no matter what's going on. So, if you're joining in, please, welcome. But please consider joining a book club, even if it's not this one. It really helps you hold yourself accountable. So, this week we were talking about polishing the scenes of your data story and making sure that data was much more consumable and usable by people. I just wanted to get in and, honestly, I started to look at some of these concepts and things that we were talking about in here, especially when it came to drawing out the story. So I'm going to go way to the end. There's tons of good things, but we're going to jump right to the last thing, which I really liked. I don't know if you've seen it, but I've kind of laid out, at one point in time, I have another video that talks through how do you whiteboard and design your reports. Honestly, I think this one has some really, oh my gosh, it's way back there. Where we go, maybe here. Oh, cow. Where it talks about how you break out and design your story and the principled approach to it, how you refine it and build it out. Yes, it's here. It's right at the end, right? How you sketch it out, right? Say, hey, these are the visuals we're thinking about. Then you use those sketches to really start to hone in and get in on the design before you then move on to how do you refine and refactor it. All right. Because I think, we've talked about sketching out our reports, sketching out the story that we want to do. And often we go into that design. But I think really this refined stage is something that can be really important for us to go to. And that's something that we can often, it's not something that we do independently. It's a group activity. It's like, okay, hey, how does this work? Does this make sense to you? What other pieces of information can we use? Can we pull in something along from outside of the data that we have in order to make this meaningful? The first thing that jumps to my mind is the concept of it's cheaper to keep a customer than it is to get a new customer, right? And so if you're trying to tell a story around customer retention and efforts around that, hey, that's a great thing to put in. If you have some metrics and some real detailed costs on that, include that, cite those references, include that inside of your data story to augment why is this important, right? So that was my favorite piece of this. But want to hear from you guys. What was your favorite piece of this book? And Belinda, I know you're chomping at the bit. I think I know I have a few things for you, but I'm gonna this time. I want to hear from Sean first because Sean is he always like serves cleanup and like I felt bad like like okay I don't want someone to say like what Sean's favorite thing was. So Sean, what was your favorite part of this book
Sure.
or this
Yeah,
chapter?
I really enjoyed this particular set because it was kind of like a two-parter. There was chapter 7, chapter 8 go hand in hand. One of the things I think Jessica had actually talked about in a previous one was about that the two pies right next to one another, and Brent basically starts off with saying, "Just so you guys know, both of them are wrong," and it's just like, wait, what are you thinking? And the first thought that popped into my head was like, I mean, wouldn't it be hilarious if they didn't actually add up to 100? But I'm like, there's no way that could happen. And you look, and 100%, it does not add up to 100%. So I think one of the things is taking the care to really be thorough and I mean, you guys are obviously very thorough, like it's your job, but for like my own analysis and whatnot, that when you're presenting something, it shouldn't be kind of like some half-baked, hashed out whatever thing that you're just like you've partially figured out what the importance of it is, but largely you're kind of just falling into the fallacies that we talked about earlier or many chapters ago, where we were talking about just basically presenting a visual and being like, man, this visual is so pretty. And it's like, but what's the meaning behind it? And you're like, but it's pretty. Yeah. But I think my favorite part about this whole chapter was the idea of noise reduction. That was definitely the thing that came through the most for me, which is, all of these little like patterns, right? Even having a pie chart where the biggest section starts at basically at 12 o'clock and everything moves from there. I think that's a pretty huge one to lessen the cognitive load even further by showing people things that they have seen before in like their daily life to help them, eat it in bite-sized chunks.
Yeah, I completely agree. In fact, I'll admit I was trying to put together a demo to recreate this and say how cool would this be, and it's really not easy to do with the tools that we have right now. So I kind of like, I don't know, I was a little flummoxed by this one. That's when kind of got at me. I'm like, that should be easy. An other category. I want to bucket them into others, right? That would be an awesome feature to see. Oh, that's great. All right, Belinda. Before I don't want you to.
No, I'm patiently waiting.
Are you?
I do have a comment. Yeah, but before I do want to comment on the noise. It's interesting you said that, Sean, because up until this book, I always thought, oh, I build ugly reports, and so many people build these really cool things, all these tabs and all these bookmarks, and it's so powerful and it does all this, and I was even thinking of having a session called My Power BI's report is an ugly baby. And I decided, no, actually, I need to keep it nice and simple and clean because of noise. This book has completely removed my my personal dissatisfaction with how pretty my reports were. And I'm sticking with functionality, maybe. Well, okay, somebody else go. I'll wait.
All right. All right, Kevin.
I like how it's continuing to have us serve up these softballs. I mean, we're getting slower and slower pitches. It's much higher arc, and you're just going to knock every one of these out of the park with the get it to our users that they can actually use this. So the one thing that I'm looking at is like he's got the sketch, right, of I'm doing like a real storyboard that's really just draw this out manually. And I'm kind of struck by, I'm not the one using it necessarily. I'm going to send it to somebody and they're going to use it. And how do basically it's a write your own ending kind of story to a certain extent, because certain people will use it for certain reasons. So that we need to have multiple kind of storylines presented such that they can pick and choose what is important at that particular time and get that out there. So maybe need multiple storylines in the sketch for whatever story they need to be able to tell.
Yeah, I think that's an excellent point, because you could be really you could overwhelm people with a page, but you could also overwhelm people with the number of places to go and reports that they have access to, right?
Sure.
Like,
Sure.
oh, hey, I want to go in and find a story, so I head over to Power BI and there's 20,000 sales reports.
Right.
Which one of those tells you the appropriate story, right? And
Right.
how do you bring them together? How do you cluster it? Yeah, that makes great sense. Yeah. Awesome. Well, then we'll pivot over to David. What was your favorite part of this story?
Hey, Chris. Yeah, I think just in general, the theme about reducing the noise, which comes up in several points, of course. And I guess it was something that I just really hadn't given a whole lot of thought to, that, oh, well, I'm going to graph everything, so that no matter what question someone might have, if I'm doing a presentation, that, the data's right there. Well, the more noise, the more confusion, so to speak. So there's, I think it's 8.2 that talks about the polish being the last 4 or 5 steps. That
Yep.
sort of hit home with me. And if I had to pick out one thing that was my favorite thing in the chapter, I think it was boiling it down to that and presenting it in that fashion. Maybe I think it's the next page.
Right here?
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah, the 7 essential principles. So, yeah, the setup and then the polish. And I think, historically, I've been focused on the first 3 steps. Not that they're unimportant, because absolutely they are, but maybe don't give enough attention to the last 4. And that, again, that visual right there was very effective and brought home some points to me.
Yeah, I like this too, and I like that instill trust is inside of here. That reminder that we have to continuously be creating environments where people can see and understand that they can trust the data that they're working with. I think that's so incredibly powerful. It's why I actually built out that I showed it to you. We kind of went through this a few before about the quality of data, right? Being able
Right.
to include this scorecard in every report, so you can see, hey, yeah, my data quality across all of these dimensions and all these metrics is still super high, right? And that
Yeah.
just continues to instill trust with people, so that if they ever see something that doesn't look right, they can know that they can go in and validate if it is or is not right. Yeah, I think I like this too, because it really touches on a lot of that stuff.
Right.
Oh, okay. Awesome. Okay, Belinda, what was your favorite part of this chapter?
Well, I have some new phrases that I've got, but that actually wasn't my favorite part. My favorite part was the focus on the text. And I thought that was pretty fascinating. And lately I've been shifting to using smart narratives more and more. I use smart narratives in my title almost every time now, so that they're dynamic to what's on the report. And so that made me feel better, but that I may be heading in the right direction to something that tells story. But the smart narrative visual itself is something that you actually kind of encouraged me to do. Oh, I love that too, with the colors and finding the 8s. But you kind of put it in a way that was really fascinating to us. You actually did it as a newspaper for executives to read one time. And the more I thought about that, the more I thought, wow, there's some real relevance in telling the story with these just having smart narratives on there as part of the explanation. But my favorite part was really, because that was something interesting and really new to me. I mean, it was something that always seemed like it was metadata, but not the body of data. It was just like this side thing. It wasn't really part of the visuals and the storytelling, but it was kind of like this well, duh moment that, and that was quite an aha moment at the same time. So thought that was interesting.
Oh, that's fantastic.
Yeah.
What
Can I tell you my two new phrases?
Yes, I was
Two
going
new
to ask.
words?
Yes.
Okay. I love these words. First of all, chart junk.
Mm.
Isn't that awesome?
Mm-hmm.
I see Sean. Did that stand out to you too, Sean? Yeah, chart junk. I love that one.
There.
And then the one I love even more is cognitive friction.
Mm.
That if it's difficult for users, so if you use 20 different colors on a visual, it's going to give the user cognitive friction. And particularly, I started thinking about like the scatter chart when you have a play button on it. In a way, that's cognitive friction all by itself. But if you select the one piece of data that you want to follow on the play axis and you turn it on, all of a sudden cognitive friction goes away and it becomes something significantly more valuable. So trying to avoid cognitive friction and stay out of that mode, I think that was really fascinating for me. So those are my two words of the day. I have them on a Post-it note right next to my password on a Post-it note.
Well, that's fantastic.
Just kidding. Oh, Kevin, we got it. It was totally a joke. Yeah.
IT's on line one for you, Belinda, by the way.
Okay.
Oh, that's awesome.
Yeah.
Oh, that's great. I really liked this example of why you should use small narratives in order to break up, what would be something that's incredibly hard to read and understand and follow, and then see how easy it is to look at these values over here, right? And I mean, imagine how, this is somewhat legible because they've got the campaigns on the ends of the line, and right now they're not overlapping terribly. But when you break it out like this, this is taking up about the same amount of page space. In fact, this is probably the same amount because this is wider than this is wider, right? And this is so much clearer as to the impact and leads generated by any given campaign. And, kind of interesting, like you would expect them to always, a campaign starts, generates more leads, and then drifts off, right? Like, some have a longer run, some, dripped off quicker. Like, what happened with this campaign? Why did this campaign, have an uptick nearing the end of it? Like, this would be something to look more into than what we saw in any of these other visuals. So I thought this was very, very fascinating to break this out and to be able to uncover those types of insights that it's very hard if you do it all inside of one visual.
And what's interesting is I haven't been. I love the concept of multiple small multiples, but I was like, oh, I don't like the fact that the axis is different on all of them, because then it makes some of them a little harder to see. But now I'm like, well, duh, they have to be that way. Otherwise, it's misleading.
Right.
And unless you're doing analytics for a political campaign, you don't want it to be that way.
Isn't that the truth? I also thought what's that? Go ahead, David.
Well, yeah, I was just going to say that illustration there brought home to me. I'm sort of like Linda. I hadn't typically veered toward the small multiples. I would have, if I were charting that, I probably would have, automatically gone with a chart like the one on the left, and not even thought about using small multiples or panels, as it is called in the book. But then when I see them side by side, it's like, well, yeah, that's a lot easier. Why don't I do it that way? So, yeah.
I think a cool and important thing to notice as well is it's not just taking one and making a whole bunch of them and throwing them all over the page. right? You don't have like a magical little Christmas tree of charts or like a little diamond. They're very carefully arrayed to facilitate comparisons. So when you look at the one on the left, you're like, well, I mean, I guess I can. You look on the right, everything is in the same format. It's very closely packed together. All you have to do is literally your eyes track across to each different element on the page, versus like, imagine if there were those small multiples, but if instead of being on one page, they were on 6. So now someone has to like scroll or page over on each of the different ones. I don't think they're going to see the comparisons in that case, versus here where they're all in the same place, in the same format, in close proximity, where it's like immediately it pops out, wow, that's an outlier.
Yeah, that's an excellent point. So you're not having to page and tab around and try and figure out where your comparatives values are. I think it's also interesting. This book has done a lot it's talked a lot about how you simplify like color schemes and how you be very selective in your colors. But this is one where you would think it wouldn't be as big of a deal if you had all of the same color. But I think because he broke this out, I think this is easier to read in this situation, right? Like he had said, like, okay, hey, if you're going to do a stacked chart, okay, use the same color, but break it out by gradients, right? Which, okay, that makes good sense, with the darker value being the larger value. But because we are doing comparisons, and it does make sense to use different colors in this situation. So, I thought that was interesting. I also thought it was interesting about the different methods of delivering the scenes of a story. And especially the scrolling story. That was actually, that was kind of what we did in this, that first BS line that I did, right? Like it tells the story, right? You start up at a high level, but then you train people to you scroll down to get to more details or to get to your next aha moments or whatnot. I've heard them called scrolly telling, I think it was. Where the story unfolds as you scroll down on any given page. And I'm like, that's very interesting, because at one point in time, the entire thought process around like web pages and content was like, it had to fit on that single pane of glass and you didn't want people scrolling. But now that's something that is becoming more common and more acceptable. Do you guys use any of these other forms of delivering scenes of a data story inside your organizations?
No. Not really.
No? Okay.
Yeah, no, I
yet.
haven't, but okay. Yeah. Good way to put it, Melinda. Yeah. It's making me think, but I'm accustomed to, slides, basically, going all the way back to using PowerPoint to present information, and now we have tabs on Power BI. So I have tended to think in those terms. Although if you take a step back, no matter what age you are, if you have grown up consuming information sort of from top to bottom, left to right, like we do in this country. Okay, that a book, a comic book, a magazine, or whatever. Well, why not? Why not in this format also? And so yeah, it's making us think. I mean, that's key.
I guess I said that incorrect. I have done tabbing and I have done clicking through the use of bookmarks and buttons and so forth, but I am getting simpler again. I'm going back to quit trying to make it like, super cool to show off to all my Power BI friends, instead make it functional for everyone else. But I think PowerPoint's going to make the whole slide story a whole lot easier, and maybe even the sections in that, especially because we can bring in visuals from entirely different workspaces into that scenes that are looking at something entirely different. So I think that's going to open up a whole wealth of information.
Yeah, you basically made PowerPoint a portal, a curated portal to the Power BI content that's most relevant to any given presentation, right? That's
Yes.
an incredible opportunity for us.
Yeah.
Okay. So
Can I
yeah.
can I comment before you go on to the next one? There was on page on page 238. For a second there, I thought it was in a different chapter, but I highlighted this quote. Nobel Prize winning economist Herbert Simon noted that information consumes the attention of its recipients. Hence, a wealth of information creates a poverty of attention. That hit home with Sean too. I could see he's shaking his head. Isn't that something? Like, oh yeah, we think we're like the information people, right? So like, oh yeah, we're going to throw all this information at you. Again, it's like, oh well, then everyone's distracted. And it made me think about training classes, especially 100 years ago when I first started doing training classes for ERP systems, and if I would let the customer convince me to train on their data, and which is a nightmare to do, because the second they see something in their own company, they're going to go off on a 30-minute tangent about that. So the attention span just goes. And very similarly, the same thing that could happen. What you're showing now, looking at the eights, they could easily go, oh, wait, speaking of these colors, we were, and they're off on a different tangent. But yeah, I thought that was a cool quote.
No, I like that. In fact, years ago I saw a TED talk. It was about the burden of choice, and the guy was talking about like, hey, at one point in time, you go into the grocery store and you wanted ranch dressing, and there were two options, and you picked the one that you liked, and you could try the other one, but if you didn't like it, you just had that other one. He said, I went into the grocery store last week and there were 50 different ranch dressings. How is anyone going to possibly know what ranch dressing is the best ranch dressing for them? And that leaves you always thinking you don't have the right ranch, right? Like you have a suboptimal choice and you have no ability to actually judge that, right? I thought that was a real interesting comment, and that's true in our reports, right? I mentioned 20,000 sales reports. Okay, our users are dealing with that same thing too, right? Like when they go in and see that, which of these reports is meaningful to me? Oh, how rapidly they go to none of these reports are meaningful to me, and that is a massive loss, right? And I think we've been on this journey of like, oh, hey, we can build these things ourselves. Now we're starting to go into a journey of like, should we build these things ourselves, right? And how do we pull back and come down to the curated stories and curated pieces of information that are impactful and that are moving us in a positive and good direction for our organization. Now, and that got me actually even thinking about like, why is that important? And we don't know about these things, right? Like, but at one point in time, SSRS was the reporting platform for Microsoft, right? But someone at Microsoft at some point in time knew those days were numbered for that product, right? And they started to like build out the Power BI team, right? How do you start to shift those people away from something, if you know something is going to be deprecated, right? If you know a product is going to go away, you organizationally don't want someone to like spin up a $5 billion investment in legacy stuff that's going to go away, or adjust their strategy to back that up and say, oh, you know what? That product is, and it could be any product really, that product is really struggling. I'm a leader in the organization. I'm going to go out and I'm going to make these changes to make that successful. Like, well, hang on. Maybe it's time for that product to go away, right? Like maybe we shouldn't be doing that. And we can help by having good curated reports that are aligning with our company's goals, are in alignment with leadership, and that we're getting feedback on which way things should be going, and helping us move in the same direction, right? Because that's why we're in these companies, right? It's to get everyone pulling in the same direction. That's one of the things that these reports can do.
Mhm.
Oh,
Exactly.
excellent.
Okay. Yeah.
A question for you. They started to talk about like how do you highlight and how do you hone in on information? Is this something you guys have had a lot of experience with? Have you done this often?
Not necessarily in the context of, say Power BI, but over the years as a consultant, I've tried to like help business owners, focus on what they need to focus. And I know Belinda works with ERP systems, and I am sure she has also run across the 12-page income statement at a company, and 12 pages of this month over the same month last year, this year to date over the same period last year, 12 pages worth of it, and it's and it means nothing because there's so much of it. And I'm a big proponent as far as financial statements. I'm getting off topic a little bit, but a P&L ought to fit on one page. And if it's more than one page, then you're not doing something right, because that's as much as someone can consume. So from that standpoint, in the past,
Cognitive friction.
Yeah, thanks. I was pitching a softball to you there. Yeah, no, it is cognitive friction. There's just so much of it, and going back to the Nobel quote there a minute ago, I think the internet is both a blessing and a curse from a standpoint of okay, 50 ranch dressings. Well, I can research all of them. I can see the 5-star rating on all of them. I can line them up and compare the sodium content and the and the whatever content, and you get old phrase analysis paralysis if you've got too much and aren't keyed in on, okay, what am I supposed to see? What am I supposed to focus on? But yeah, as far as data visualizations, yeah, I think you've constantly got to fight a battle against putting too much in front of the user, too many bookmarks, etc.
This is part of the same topic that I'm really having a hard time verbalizing. Maybe I'm getting a little closer to it as we get closer to the end of the chapter, that I keep talking about over the last several chapters and last several weeks. And especially for all of us on the call are consultants, and we are not part of the company. So unless somebody's paying us for data analysis services, it's really hard for us to come in and really go in and dig a lot. But so in our case, I guess that's why I struggle so much with where do we capture the aha moment, like on what we have on the screen, Campaign D. Where do we focus that, okay, Campaign D is where is something worthy. This visual, that particular piece of data, a datum, is worthy of creating a story around. So for someone in our particular situation, that's a little harder to come up with and do, but that's kind of where I'm getting it. So I think I'm getting closer to presenting my issue better, but
well,
Week 10, when we're done, it'll be crystal clear.
Well, that's the beauty of this, the work we do, right? It's not been done before. We get to explore and figure out how this all works. Well, the reason I ask about this highlighting is that there's some functionality inside of Power BI a lot of people aren't aware of, and that's the ability to toggle from your format screen how you're going to interact with different items. And in this case, I can highlight and I can see what percentage this customer is within here, right? So this is a good way to highlight this. But if I go and I look at someone who's much smaller, right, that number can suddenly become minuscule and hard to understand, right? And you might want to change away from highlighting to filtering, right? So when I select on something smaller, it just goes down to that individual item and starts to pull away that noise. Now we'd probably want to have a number or something on there like that, but lots of different, or just a different way to interact and build our reports to be purposeful and mindful of what it is, the experience we're trying to create and story we're trying to tell amongst the data.
Do you have on that scatter plot, do you have a time element on it so you could play it?
I don't right now. I could add that.
Because one of the things that's one of the examples of what I was talking about by reducing the noise, because that looks noisy.
Mm-hmm.
But if you have a play on it and you select one, so select one of those and then run play. Nope, not that way. Click on an individual bubble and now run play. Oh, it's not. Oh yeah, there's just not a lot of movement, but you could see there's a line on there, so it tracks. Ooh. Yeah. So if you keep it selected and then play, then you're going to see usually. Well, I don't know why it's not showing. It must be the way you have it, but that eliminates the noise. Yeah, there you go.
Oh, that's interesting.
Yeah, that eliminates the noise a lot on that, and it becomes more valuable because this is a valuable visual. Because it helps us find outliers. But if we're looking at it with all those bubbles, then according to the book, it's noisy. But when you add the element of, let's see the track that this took to get there to become an outlier, then this changes it a lot. So we step beyond just identifying the outliers and playing with it. And you know what? I need to just turn my computer off and end for the day because it appears I showed you something that you haven't been playing with. So if I could teach Chris Wagner something.
This is fantastic. I didn't realize you could do that. That did not do that the last time I played with it. That's great.
Well, good, because you teach me something every time we talk, so I'm glad.
Are you guys familiar with the, I've kind of cheated because I read the whole book, but have you seen the TED Talks by like Hans Rosling?
Yes.
Yeah. So I was watching that, and it really, what you were just talking about, Belinda, the idea of adding a third element, a third variable. So having a plot that tracks across time, I think that is a way to uncover even like new insights. And it kind of gets me excited because thinking about, instead of like just comparing two variables, what if you can do three? And so instead of just saying like, let's say revenue and time, and then you have this and that's how it changes. What if you can say like whatever revenue and customers and time, and just examining like different relationships that you may not have resisted, and seeing it like calculus wise, if you take like a third integral of something and you see a surface, like to see like where is the ultimate like peak or trough in this like big blanket looking thing, instead of just looking at points on a plot and seeing a peak over here. Because what if like when you add in another one of those variables, it completely changes the behavior of everything. And so if you basically like zoom out now and you add time to the mix, a completely different trend presents itself.
Mm-hmm.
So that I thought was kind of cool.
I haven't seen anything that he's done that hasn't just knocked my socks off. And it's funny because when my journey first began with Power BI, before it was what it is now, when it was just some features inside of Excel, I was using his database, Gapminder, as examples. I didn't know who he was. And so I got so excited when I realized it. But yeah, he is. I love how he keeps comparing people's intelligence to chimps answering the same questions, like, oh yeah, chimp will get 50-50 right. So human beings are like less than chimps, right? Because, we try to put intelligence behind it, but yes. But that's a really cool point. But that's adding a little bit more noise and a little bit more data. But that's part of the analysis process. Just because you're using something, and maybe that's something we should think about, just because we're using something as part of the analysis process to get to what the book refers to as the aha moment, doesn't mean that that is part of the whole storytelling report.
Yeah.
So maybe I'm just thinking of this now and starting to get excited, but maybe that's still, Chris, when we were talking earlier this week and you was like, there's 3 levels of a report. What was it? Managerial,
Executive manager,
executive,
analyst,
and-
or user.
and yeah. So so maybe there is just a whole analyze process of it. Yeah. Oh, that's really cool.
Well, I honestly, I got excited about what you were talking about because, Sean, you're exactly right. A scatter chart allows us to measure three metrics at once, right? Across many items, right? So we get amount, quantity, and the size is controlled by, what do I got here? The amount that actually shipped. So yeah, I guess those are relative, but you could have profit or something along those lines, right? So you could see, who's the most profitable of your people, right? So who cares if you only shipped one item if they, if it was, more profitable than everything else you did, right? Like, but that to your point, Belinda, creates too much noise and junk. But, so, oh man, I like this. I like this time dimension. So I limited it top 20. Right now, you can actually see the people and how they operate and flow, as well.
Select one again, and then play.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's phenomenal. Look at this customer who, at the end of this, was our biggest guys, right? Like our biggest people here, like that upper right corner, which is the most key, like you want to key in on them. He went from bad to good and great to back down to bad again. What is going on with Vigorous Exercise Company, right? Like,
now do this with just one customer and you have no noise, but the line still adds all that value because the line shows us the journey that was taken. Because if you could watch it and you can see it, but then when you get to the end, it's like, okay, I see where they ended up. They ended up in the top right corner, but are they staying in the magic quadrant, or what journey did they take to get there? Maybe we could see some seasonality that occurs if you're looking at it in quarters. Oh yeah, I see seasonality. It tends to keep taking these swings. So, maybe we do something a little different, offer them a discount in the slow months. I don't know. So, there's a lot of cool information that could be learned by looking at this, and it doesn't have to be noisy. It could be just one, but
yeah, I mean, when I didn't have this in, right? Like, I didn't have a top end. This was, even filtered down by year, this still was a little noisy. But when you go in, you can, hone in on top 20. Oh, I cleared out the field, but it's that's relatively speaking. Oh, come on, Power BI, don't give up on me. Relatively easy to do.
Sorry, you invoked a song in my head. Sorry.
Yeah, I mean, oh man, this is exciting.
I hear it in your voice. You're so animated physically, but I could hear it in your voice too. So that makes me really, really happy. So another thing is the whole color story. Using the idea of the color wheel, and I kind of dug that, the whole idea of the color wheel. That made me think about. I mean, I have one of those from one of my 1,000 hobbies, which is sewing, especially like home interior stuff. I have one of those from making drapes and things, trying to find what can look what actually goes together, like what color goes together, because typically each on a color wheel like this, the exact opposite of the color wheel is a compatible color to what you're looking at. So if you have, like in this one where you're showing the one on the left, the blue line, that means the pie slice directly across with the browns, those are complementary colors to the blue. So those would be good color sets to use together. So I thought, hey, I'm gonna have to go dig out my color wheel when I'm working on this.
Oh, that
But
is.
I like that whole approach. Yeah.
Yeah, I think that makes a lot of sense. I think it also even means that we should, consider, purposely designing our report themes and our report templates that go along these lines, right? Like, okay, hey, let's choose an arc here, right? So that we maintain colors, but this is a way for us to add in some variety, right? Like, it's hard to just see one grain, but if we go from, that deep dark blue all the way up into light green, now you could start to really detect, more gradients and separations inside there. And
Right.
by avoiding the red hues, now we address the colorblind side of the house as well, right? Because now we're only playing on
Well,
one side of that.
Yeah, but you know what? I think every color theme should have a green and a red in it, because there are some numbers that just make more sense to represent green as positive and red as negative. So, like for example, I like a line chart for a financial statement, looking at the months across the y-axis, and I'll have 3 lines on it, an income line, an expense line, and a profit line. And I like my revenue line to be green. I like my expense line to be red. And the blue, I typically do whatever works with the logo of the company, And so that's typically how I like to do it. But I mean, you have to be careful because of red and green color blindness being the most prevalent color blindness. But I think everyone should have a red and a green. That's just my opinion.
So it's one of the things that I was expecting to see in this book that I didn't see mentioned was there was a big study about people's response to information that was delivered with the color red, and they found that people disproportionately responded to information by a factor of it was something like 8 when they saw information that was highlighted in red, because we've been classically conditioned, if you're in the US or Europe, in schools, grading papers were like a negative, like an F in a red pen, right? And so we respond worse to red colors than necessarily that news deserves. But if you use
red, stop, red, danger.
Right. Yeah. Red is bad, right? And
Not in every multiverse, though.
well, yes,
I'll see if we have any Doctor Strange folks here.
But the paper suggested to use shades of purple to still bring out the negative. Like if you get like a redder purple, that still calls out the negative side of that value, but people recognize that it's not green, it's redder, and they recognize it as bad, but then they don't respond as negative as they should. So I thought it was interesting that they didn't bring that up.
I like purple, but I do sometimes choose coral or some shade of coral and orange to represent the red. But that's an interesting concept.
Yeah.
Yeah, because red is really in your face. On the screen, red can look like, like neon red.
Right. That was the one I liked. Hey, if you're going to choose colors that are one away on the color wheel. Don't put them right next to each other, right? This was the input that I really liked.
And if you look at the 2 yellow pieces on the center, look at those. That is so hard to tell a difference between those 2.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And grays are the same way.
Yep.
Gradients of gray.
Yep.
Yeah, I think I really got something from that too, which is personally when I make my own little visuals and stuff, when I'm plotting data, I would never before reading this have thought to actually use the same hue of all of the colors. So basically, like choosing a radius per se on this kind of wheel, and then acting and choosing colors along whatever that radius happens to be. It's just like previously I would have been like, I want this one up here, and I want like a purple way out there, and a blue way in here, and then a red, and it doesn't look very good. Like it feels like it's disjointed. And so it's interesting that this was something brought up that can ultimately, tie everything together without you necessarily even realizing that things are being tied together.
Boy, wouldn't it be cool if we could get that like in our tools, something like this where like, okay, hey, I want this color. Okay, you want this color? We recommend these colors to go along with it. And then you could just, like, oh, okay, well, it provides 3 recommendations. Okay, if you're trying to show differences, here's the differences we recommend. If you're trying to show, positive scales, here's that, or, here's a gradient, or here's your arc, right? That would be kind of cool, right? Like a recommendation engine, so you wouldn't have to be a classically trained, artist or, someone who knows about these things to get that value.
Oh, there are some pretty good themes already out there. I like the one that I think I'm pretty sure Amanda Kofsky did it. The basic Microsoft colors. They're like really dark, vivid. They're like the original 9 crowns, basically. Or how many crowns we had in a box, the big basic box. But one of the things, though, it really is so easy to take if someone has the shading and the opacity right, for all those individual components, you could change the colors easily in JSON. So that's how I cheat. I don't build anything from scratch. Although, have you tried Mike Carlo's tool?
Oh yes, Mike Carlo had Power BI tips. Their tool for building a theme is very impressive, and you can actually go in and set up full themes, so you can define. Sean, you may not know this, but the theme that we've built and used, we've set all of the parameters for every standard out of the box visual as part of our theme, so that when anyone goes in to build out a report, they have a baseline. Here is how this should look, and you can, as an analyst, or you could focus in on the data and the delivery and the story, and you don't have to be as concerned around the formatting and the color selections and all of that good stuff. You can, right? You can go in and adjust as much as or as little as you want, but it's all been meticulously picked over and defined inside of there. So,
Chris, can you go to page 255?
I sure can.
Before we run out of time, because this bothered me.
255.
While you're doing that, Chris, I'll make the comment that if a company does what you just described and is consistent in application, like, red's always bad, green's always good.
Mm-hmm.
I think that goes a long way to helping with the cognitive friction. What Melinda brought out earlier is, okay, on this chart, what's good and what's bad? Oh, my mind is already trained to these colors represent something negative, these colors represent something positive, and it helps reduce that friction. So
go scroll to the right 2 times, because that page, one more time. Okay, still page 255. This visual at the top.
Yeah.
Okay, first of all, I love the idea of putting in an image for the top 3. But did anybody else think that Milano wedge pump was not one of the top 3s? I know it's above the trend line, and I'm guessing that's why they selected it. But am I wrong, or is there one more data point that is not only farther to the right for product views, but slightly higher in orders?
You are spot on. Yeah.
Yeah, that bothered me. Okay, and then I had another thing. Page 2. I think it was 230. 238.
238. Which one was
I
it?
think that's it. No, that wasn't 238. It's the one with a lot of different visuals, and you can see they have a scatter chart. No, it's later than 238. It is on page, oh, here we go, 250, page 250. I want to know, I don't know if we could do this, but the anchor line one.
Mm.
Can we do that? Can we put it like a line over a particular point? So if we select it, we could turn it into like a grid. I love that great big, well, anchor lines, I guess. Can we do that?
Like crosshairs.
Yeah, exactly. Because what's cool about it to me is, where does everybody fall in relation to this data point? Where do they fall inside the crosshairs, basically? I just think that is too cool.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I just love that. I love that. And I also loved the idea of shading the column or chart where negative numbers would fall into into a different shaded reason. And then on the bar chart below that, the grid lines with the sections, how cool was that? I mean, where you could say, put this line, I guess I need to get on ideas, put this line on a bar chart every 1,000, every time we get to like 1,000, if we're looking at dollars, $1,000, and then you could just see literally where they stand. Those little tiny, yeah. Okay. Did you get it on there? How'd you get it on there?
So you can add constant lines, but these constant lines can be defined by a function. So I should be able to take resellers order quantity. Resellers order quantity.
Could you use a DAX function for selected? And then if
that's exactly what this is, right? So this would be whatever was select. Oh no, I guess it does change it, or it does hold it consistent. Unless is my time thing mucking with that?
It might be.
Get out of here! Oh my. Yeah, no, yeah, that's mucking with it.
Okay.
Yeah. Oh.
Well, just food for thought. I love those two. I love those two. The two things: the grid lines with the section, which basically is a bar chart, and then the anchor lines on the scatter chart. Because if you could click on it, and I love the crosshairs, as Sean called it. The crosshairs move. Yeah. It's interesting to see. Now, I don't know. It just is interesting to see who falls into that grid.
Well, and section. I also think it would be really helpful if we had these grid lines to be able to see exactly what it was that they were at, right? Like, so you could, I know you can hover over it and you can see what it is, but if you clicked on something and these grid lines came into play, you didn't have to be hovering over it to have a conversation or to think about it or talk about it, right? You could clearly see where it's at inside of there. Same thing with a configurable shading area. This would be incredible for be able to see those negatives, or to be able to clearly see what's in the future, right? It's like I know that there's forecasting available inside the Power BI service, but there's lots of tools that will do forecasting. If the data that I'm bringing in my model extends out into the future and is from that forecasted information that our data scientists generated, I would love to be able to configure that visual to have that be a grayed area or a colored area like this, so that it was like, oh, it's clear that hasn't happened and that this is projections for us, right? We could do stuff with the lines or whatever, but it would be nice if we could, if we had that sectioning in, because even if you look at like the forecasting does that, right? It'd be nice if we could do that as well. So, all right, we are at time. It's been an hour. It's been a fantastic conversation. Thank you guys all so very much. Belinda, Sean, David, and Kevin. I know we lost you, but thank you guys so much for calling in. Thank you to everyone who joined us online. We really appreciate this. We got 1 week left of this. I'm super excited about finishing this up. Clearly, Sean is. He already finished the book, so I can't wait to see what happens in chapter 9. Looking forward to this. Fingers crossed. Maybe Brent. Yeah, you hop on next week. Let's see. Maybe we could get Brent Dykes to actually join in and be part of the conversation. So, thank you guys all very much. You guys have a great day. Peace. All right. Thanks, guys.
Thanks. Yeah, that was good.